Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to never miss another update.
Once upon a time, Prophet Dawood had a beautiful and intelligent son. He named his son Suleman. Like his father, Suleman was just and wise. When he was still a child, he filed a complaint with his father. The story was that a flock of sheep had entered a vineyard. Sheep had eaten all the leaves and grapes of the garden. When the owner of the garden complained to Prophet Dawood, he ordered that all the sheep should be given to the owner of the garden. But Prophet Suleman said, "Give the garden to the owner of the sheep, and give the sheep to the owner of the garden. The owner of the garden will use the sheep's milk and wool until the garden is full of fruits again." Everyone accepted Prophet Suleman's sentence. After Prophet Dawood passed away, Prophet Suleman succeeded him. God blessed Prophet Suleman with a lot of powers. The wind was at Prophet Suleman's service. Prophet Suleman could command the wind to take him wherever he wanted. He could use the jinn to work for him. He was able, by God, to put the demons in chains because the demons were always sabotaging and deceiving people. Prophet Suleman had a huge army that was always ready to serve him. Even animals and birds listened to him. As Prophet Suleman went from place to place, the birds followed him. Once upon a time, Prophet Suleman noticed that a bird was not among the many birds flying above his head. He asked the rest, "Where is Hudhud?" No one knew. An hour later, when Hudhud appeared, Prophet Suleman asked, "Where did you go?" "Your Majesty, there is a land you do not know about," Hudhud said. "In that land, a queen reigns that you have never heard of. She has a very large palace and sits on a throne that none of your courtiers have ever seen. It's the land of Saba, and the queen is a very fair, powerful, intelligent, and beautiful woman. But despite all that, the queen and her people worship the sun. Satan has led them astray," Prophet Suleman said. "I have to invite her to worship the one and only God." Then he wrote a letter and handed it to Hudhud and said, "Take my letter and throw it at them, and wait to see what they say." Hudhud flew and arrived in the palace a few days later. The queen of Saba and the courtiers were all gathered in her court. Hudhud threw Prophet Suleman's letter in front of her and flew to a corner and waited. The queen opened the letter and read it with surprise. She was silent for a moment and said to the courtiers, "Suleman finally knows about us. Suleman has invited us to worship God and has written that he would otherwise invade our land. Oh great queen, we have great power. We can fight Suleman's army if that is what you wish," said a courtier. "When kings conquer a land, they destroy it and cause corruption and kill innocent people," said the queen. "Let us try to talk to Suleman. We all know that kings are very fond of gifts, so prepare precious gifts and send them to him. If he accepts the gifts, it is clear that he is not a prophet. Then we will fight with him. But if he does not accept the gifts, then he is the prophet of God, and we must act wisely." In the courtyard, expensive gifts were prepared and sent with a special envoy from the queen to King Suleman. When he reached the palace of Suleman, the queen's messenger went forward and saluted Prophet Suleman, requesting to bring the queen's gifts to him. Prophet Suleman smiled and said, "No, my invitation to the queen and your people was not to receive gifts. I asked you to believe in God. Now return these gifts to your queen." The special messenger, overwhelmed by the greatness of the palace and the glory of Suleman's government, slowly picked up the gifts and returned to his land. The queen, waiting for his return to the palace, said, "Tell me what happened." He recounted what he had seen. The queen thought a little and said to herself, "As I had guessed, he is the prophet of God." Then she said to the courtiers, "I want to meet Suleman and see if he really is a prophet of God." The queen selected some of her senior advisors and ministers. Then she concealed a beautiful and glorious throne in a large hall and sent some guards to guard it. The queen and her companions set off. This news reached Suleman very quickly. Prophet Suleman decided to show the queen a miracle. He pondered a little, then turned to his courtiers and said, "I've heard that the queen of Saba has a strange interest in her throne. Which one of you can bring me her throne before the queen arrives here?" A jinn stood before Prophet Suleman and said, "O Prophet, before you finish your speech and get up, I will bring her throne to you." Then a second jinn came forward and said, "I'll bring the throne before you blink." Prophet Suleman accepted what he said and said, "Bring it." Prophet Suleman had not yet blinked when the jinn brought the queen's throne in front of Prophet Suleman. Prophet Suleman thanked God and his power. "Now we want to test this queen's intelligence," said Prophet Suleman. "I want to make some changes so that she doesn't recognize her throne." The carpenters and woodworkers revolved around the throne and eventually changed it so much that even the courtiers could not recognize the queen's throne. When the Queen of Saba arrived at Prophet Suleman's palace, he ordered a servant to bring her down with respect. The queen was amazed by all the glory, majesty, and kindness. He walked slowly and with dignity, and his ministers and advisors accompanied him. Prophet Suleman welcomed her kindly. The queen looked at the beautiful throne. One of Prophet Suleman's advisors stood up and said, "Queen, is your throne more beautiful than this?" The queen smiled and said calmly, "It looks like my own throne." We were already aware of Suleman's power, but this is really impressive. In this way, the queen gave up her sun worship and invited her people to worship the one God. The Queen of Saba stayed with Prophet Suleman for many years. Prophet Suleman used his abilities to make his land prosperous and to make more people happy in other lands. Years passed, and one day, Prophet Suleman was standing in the courtyard of his palace. A young handsome man suddenly came out of a corner. Prophet Suleman said, "Who are you and how did you come here? I banned people from entering my courtyard." The young man said, "I am not afraid of kings, neither of brave men, nor of commanders or leaders." Prophet Suleman was surprised by this young man's words. "It's okay. What do you want?" The young man said, "I am the angel of death. I've come to take your soul." He said this and took his soul to another world as Prophet Suleman stood there, leaning on his staff. An hour later, a special chef approached Prophet Suleman and told him that his food was ready, but returned to the kitchen when he didn't get an answer. An hour later, a commander arrived. He was surprised at Prophet Suleman's motionless body in the yard. Others came but did not say anything for fear of annoying Prophet Suleman. Although everyone was surprised, no one would allow himself to come near him. At this time, termites were commissioned by God to eat his staff. When the king was gone, Prophet Suleman fell to the ground. Thus, everyone realized that Prophet Suleman had died.